and welcome to the Cinemaniacs podcast. I'm your host, Chris Reed, editor of Film Festival Today, lead film critic at Hammer to Nail, and chair of the Department of Film and Moving Image at Stevenson University. On today's inaugural show, we're going to talk about the 2024 Toronto International Film Festival, aka TIFF, which featured many films that you'll probably be hearing about this fall and some of which may win awards. Joining me on the show is my fellow critic, Charles Kirkland, an active member of the Washington, D.C. Area Film Critics Association, as am I, also an active member of the Critics' Choice Association, voting member and head writer for the Black Reel Awards, and features programmer for the largest BIPOC film festival in Washington, D.C., the Light Reel Film Festival. Welcome, Charles. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Chris, for having me on the inaugural episode. I'm grateful to be here.
I'm so excited. Let's start with you. What were your favorite films at TIFF this year? And I should preface this by saying that both you and I were there on the ground, in person, watching films. So what were your favorite films at this year's TIFF?
Thanks, Chris. My favorite film from TIFF has to be The Piano Lesson, which is Denzel Washington's latest presentation of the August Wilson play of the same name. Malcolm Washington is the director in his directorial debut, and John David Washington, along with Danielle Deadwyler and Samuel L. Jackson, star in the film. For those who have watched John David Washington in the past, he's done this role on Broadway for a number of years, so it's really great to see him bring life to this film. And so that's what made it my favorite of the entire festival. Right behind that is Emilia Perez, Netflix's Oscar contender, with starring Zoe Saldana, Selena Gomez, and Carla Sofia Gascon, who plays the titular character Emilia Perez. It's a narco thriller, but it's also a musical, and it's not a musical like Hamilton or even Les Mis, but it does have some musical undertones that make it a special film and very different from things you may have seen in the past. My third favorite film would have to be Without Blood. This is Angelina Jolie's directorial film, starring Salma Hayek and Demian Bashir. And Salma Hayek plays a woman whose family was murdered as a child, and she's trying to exact revenge upon the gang that committed these murders. And so it's a really great two-piece because it focuses on Salma and Bashir, and it's a really gorgeous movie, I think, as well. Piece by Piece, which is Morgan Neville's latest documentary about the life of Pharrell Williams, is a very interesting piece because it's not only very insightful into the life of Pharrell Williams, but it's also done in Lego. So it's a Lego movie, but it's also the story of Pharrell Williams becoming a musical phenomenon. It's a great documentary, and it's also could be the best animated feature of the year. So I look forward to seeing how that one turns out. Matter of fact, it's the only documentary that I saw at the entire festival. I kind of cheat because I can. And so for number 5, I have 2 movies. So I guess that's 6. I, the Executioner, which is the sequel to the Korean thriller Veteran. It's a highly stylized action thriller, lots of martial arts happening in the film, and it's a very good story that focuses on social media and the impacts that it can have on police solving crimes. And then alongside of that, another action film that I have is The Shadow Strays, which is a Netflix production about and it's kind of like Proud Mary that starred Taraji P. Henson. The story is very similar about a woman who tries to save a young boy, and but the whole story is so highly stylized and like, again, lots of martial arts from beginning to end. It's just insane what they do and how they do it. The story is much further developed than Proud Mary was. So I'm very happy to say that it's a film that Netflix can make into a sequel. I mean, into a series of films, and I think they're clear on that intent as you get to the end of the film. So again, another great action film that came out of TIFF, and so I'm looking forward to all of these.
That is a really amazing list, and what intrigues me the most about it is that I saw none of those films, although quite a few of them were on my list, including Denzel Washington's A Piano Lesson. I've been a huge fan of Danielle Detweiler ever since seeing her in Till, and so I look forward to seeing that one as well as a few others that you mentioned. At the top of my list is The Life of Chuck, which won the People's Choice Award at this year's TIFF, and no wonder. It's a really moving film that celebrates life while centering its narrative on death. You'll have to see it to know what I mean. It's an adaptation of a 2020 Stephen King story from director Mike Flanagan, who has previously directed plenty of horror, including some series for Netflix, my favorite among them being Midnight Mass, and also directed the Stephen King adaptation Dr. Sleep. So I highly recommend this film. It stars Tom Hiddleston, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Karen Gillan, and Mark Hamill, among others. It's really quite a moving story. It should be picked up soon for distribution, so you'll hopefully be hearing quite a lot about it over the course of the fall. Next up, I'd like to mention a film, The Seed of the Sacred Fig, from Iranian director Mohammad Rasulov, who actually had to flee Iran after making this film because he was facing a prison sentence because of the content of the movie. The movie takes on Iran's repression of women, particularly centering its narrative around the protests over the woman who was killed for ostensibly improperly wearing her hijab. And so you can understand perhaps why the Iranian authorities didn't like this film. It's not just this depressing look at the state of women in Iran. It has humor. It has a really tense narrative. I highly recommend. After that, I'd like to mention I'm Still Here from Brazilian director Walter Salles, he who has done films in the past such as The Motorcycle Diaries or Central Station. And this film takes place in the 70s when the military dictatorship of Brazil was cracking down more heavily on dissent than it had in the 60s. It took power in the 60s, and it follows the real life story of one family after the patriarch is arrested. Very moving film. After that, I'd like to mention Blue Road, the Edna O'Brien story from director Sinead O'Shea. She's Irish, so is the subject of the film, the celebrated author Edna O'Brien. It's a documentary portrait of this very important novelist and screenwriter who just died this year. So it's a very timely documentary. And then I can't forget to mention the Argentinian film Kill the Jockey, which comes to us from Luis Ortega. It's kind of hard to describe the plot of this movie. It's sort of a gender-bending thriller with this almost surrealist quality to the narrative. There is a jockey. There are people who want to kill him, but the story offers so much more than that. And this happens to be the pick from Argentina to submit this year for the Best International Feature Oscar. And I should mention that the film The Seed of the Sacred Fig is Germany's pick. Germany is where Mohammad Rasulov has taken refuge. It's Germany's pick for the Best International Feature Oscar. And finally, since you did 6, Charles, I'll do 6 as well. I'll mention Dahomey from French director Mati Diop. This is a documentary with a little bit of fictional aspect to it, so let's call it a hybrid, but mostly documentary, that follows the repatriation of stolen works of art from the Kingdom of Dahomey that is now Benin. The Republic of Benin is receiving these artworks, and Mati Diop follows their return, and then gives us this really, really amazingly vibrant discussion from this conference on what the repatriation means to the people of present-day Benin. And I was blown away, actually, by the complexity of the conversation that we witnessed. So those are my 6 films. Did you see any of these, Charles, since I didn't see any of yours?
I did see Kill the Jockey, yes, and I agree with you. It's kind of hard to describe the film, but it was a really good film. I also wanted to mention that Danielle Deadwyler's other film at TIFF called 40 Acres, I think her performance in that film is much superior to the one that she does in The Piano Lesson. But it's a great film also to check out.
I will watch her read the phone book. She's that good. So I'll have to check out both of those movies. Anything that you think audiences will be hearing about? Any movie that you think will be an awards contender, whether you saw it or not, out of TIFF?
I think Saturday Night, a lot of people are thinking is going to be pretty good. I'm not sure if it's Oscar quality, but I mean, a lot of people did like the film, and it documents the first Saturday Night Live show, and actually in real time, it goes from it counts it down until the start. So a lot of people enjoyed that. The Substance is another film that a lot of people saw, and they felt that it was a really good film. And I just did get to see it myself. Like you said, The Life of Chuck, I've heard a lot of great things. And TIFF is usually a good predictor of the People's Choice Award has been, a good sign for Oscars in the past. So The Life of Chuck is getting a lot of buzz.
Well, that's what I'm putting my money on, and I'm no Mike Flanagan partisan. I've enjoyed some of his work, but I really, really found that film to be quite powerful. So I am hoping that the Toronto buzz carries it forward. Well, Charles, I want to thank you for sharing not only your list of top films that you saw at TIFF, but also your thoughts on what people should look out for this fall. It was a great conversation, and I'm really excited that very soon we'll be seeing each other in person and not just virtually, and that will be at the Middleburg Film Festival, which runs October 17th to the 20th in Middleburg, Virginia. Until then, my friend.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. It was a lot of fun. My pleasure. I can't wait to see you at Middleburg, and maybe we can do this again.
Indeed. Next up, I'd like to share one of the in-person interviews that I conducted at this year's TIFF with Irish director Sinead O'Shea, who made the wonderful biographical documentary Blue Road, The Edna O'Brien Story. Renowned Irish writer Edna O'Brien died at the age of 93 on July 27th of this year. Her literary debut in the 1960s with a trio of novels shocked her compatriots through a frank discussion of female desire and ambition. That was merely the start of her career, as we learn in Blue Road, The Edna O'Brien Story from documentarian Sinead O'Shea. O'Shea puts on a full cast of characters to testify to the wonders of O'Brien's personality and writing. Let's hear what O'Shea herself has to say about the film. So you started filming Edna O'Brien in August of 2023.
Yeah.
For how long had you wanted to make a film about her?
Well, I'd interviewed her 10 years before for an American magazine called Publishers Weekly. I used to profile English and Irish writers for that. And I hadn't really known that much about her despite studying English literature in college, so it's a bit strange. All I knew of her, in fact, was that she was kind of fluffy. That was my sense of her. And so in preparation for this interview, I had to read her books, and then I realized, wow, these are incredible. But also, even though they'd been written in the 1960s, they really spoke to my own experiences growing up. So I realized I'd made a terrible mistake in thinking that she was fluffy and irrelevant. And then I met her, and it really does remain one of the most profound encounters I've ever had. She was so funny and interesting and emotional and charismatic. So I really loved meeting her. And then the summer before last, I was getting ready to come to TIFF actually with another film. And I was heavily pregnant, and I met a woman at an event, and I was talking about bad men, and I quoted Edna O'Brien to her, and she said, "You should make a film about her. She's my best friend." And there was a big age gap between them, so I was like, that's quite strange. But she was right. They were best friends. And so it took me about a year to track down Edna. She wasn't, I don't think she really understood what feature documentaries were, and she wasn't that enthusiastic. And I asked that woman if she'd help me find Edna, and so she persuaded Edna to come on board. And that woman was Barbara Broccoli, who's the James Bond producer, and she sort of urged Edna to keep going with it.
Barbara Broccoli is her best friend, the woman who was saying she was her best friend?
Yeah, It turned out. So Barbara persuaded Edna to meet me, and then Edna became very enthusiastic about the project. She was admitted to hospital shortly afterwards, so she would send me these long voice memos via Barbara of like her vision for the film and like various titles and so on. But I knew realistically that, you know, Edna was 92 and she had cancer and she didn't have long left, and so I needed to raise a budget and gather a team and get the film made as quickly as I can. So,
how did you land on Jessie Buckley as the on-screen voice of a younger Edna O'Brien, and did you have any difficulties in getting her for the film? Probably not if you had Barbara Broccoli on board, but...
Yeah, actually, Barbara wasn't so much. Barbara was the Edna side of things. She was just, I think, the person reassuring Edna that I was a quite normal person, I suppose. Jessie came about because actually the programmer here, Tom Powers, who programs documentary, I was telling him about my Edna idea and I had a teaser film made. And he was like, maybe you should get an actor involved to help voice the diaries. And he shared a film called The Disappearance of Sherry Hyde with me, which is great, by Nicole Newton. And so I was like, okay. And so I was trying to think of actors, and especially Irish actors who could connect to that material. And strangely, it must sound like I move in glitzy circles myself. I really don't. But the filmmaker Charlie Kaufman and his partner Eva HD had somehow seen my previous film, and they had made a film with Jessie Buckley. And so I asked them if they would ask Jessie if she would talk to me about doing the voiceover. And it was actually really easy. I just sent an email, and she was extremely enthused. She's from Kerry, which is quite close to Clare, and I don't know, I think every Irish woman of a certain age really understands the Edna story. I mean, to be honest, I think women all over the world really understand the Edna story.
Yeah. I actually just traveled to Ireland this summer and went through both County Clare and County Kerry. So beautiful island. How did you choose, or how did you cast the rest of your interview subjects? Because you have some really amazing people on the screen, including another actor, Gabriel Byrne, who I love that section where he's reading from her work. But how did you get them to be involved with the film, all of them?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was very fortunate, because when you are saying to somebody, I'm working with Edna O'Brien to make a kind of final film about her life, people really listen. But in Gabriel's case, strangely, he too had seen that film that was in TIFF 2 years ago, and so he had emailed me about it. And so he seemed quite nice, and then I realized he knew Edna, and not just that he knew Edna, but that he had been an advocate for her when she won this award in France. He had spoken on her behalf, had given a 40-minute speech. He knew her work intimately, and he adored her. They were really close friends. So when I asked him if he'd like to participate, he was really thrilled. So, you know, that's the Edna effect, you know, that she... If you're into Edna, you're into Edna. You know, she's quite divisive. There's a lot of people who don't like her, but if you're in, you're in. There's a lot of lore. And Walter Mosley, I mean, he was amazing. We had no budget for the film, and so, you know, he flew himself over to New York to meet us and gave me a day, and because he really feels Edna changed his life, and that she was the person who enabled him and empowered him to write. It's so beautiful, their relationship. So, you know, Edna has that effect on people, and people wanted to testify.
I love that section with Walter Mosley as well. I'm a fan of his work, and it was I had no idea that you know, she had been teaching in the United States and taught him, so that's really quite lovely. There's a lot of wonderful archival of O'Brien, because she sat for so many TV interviews, and then she was a celebrity in her time. So what was it like sifting through what must have been countless hours of this footage and deciding what would go in your film?
Yeah, well, I had some help with this, thankfully. We had a wonderful archive producer, Paul Bell, who worked on Amy, actually, in Senna with Asif Kapadia. And so he had great contacts within the BBC and ITV. And so I'd seen quite a bit of stuff myself on YouTube. So I knew there was good stuff out there, but I didn't realize how good it was until Paul became involved. So that was great. For me, the most magical piece of archive is this film that her own teenage son at the time, Carlo, made called Night, which is basically a visualization of one of her books, Night. And Night is in itself quite an autobiographical book. So basically his film becomes in its way a documentary. And so we were able to kind of move in and out of that a lot. And it's beyond a gift for a documentary maker. And it was really beautiful. So that was wonderful. And then we had the diaries, because when Edna became very enthused about the project, she directed me to Emory College in Georgia to read the Most Naked Ones. And I had a wonderful producer, Claire McCabe, who went over and photographed thousands of pages and sent them back to me for me to transcribe. And we had a whole little team then of transcribers.
Why are her diaries in Emory College in Atlanta, Georgia?
She needed the money. They acquired them. I didn't know there's a whole world of like university archives. They you sell things basically. So they were the best ones, and Emory College acquired those.
What would you like? What would your hope be that someone watching the film, someone who maybe didn't know Edna O'Brien before, would take away from this movie?
I think I'd like them to know that here was one of the great lives. I would go as far as to say one of the great lives of the 20th century. What an amazing life. I'd like them to engage with her writing because it's brilliant. It's of a really high standard. And I guess as well, I'd like people to engage with the idea of what a female artist is and can be and should be, because Edna was subjected to very different standards compared to her male peers. You know, Norman Mailer stabbed his first wife, but you know, there's headlines about like Edna interviewing somebody from Sinn Féin, the IRA. You know, she was being constantly criticized. You know, it was totally acceptable for a writer in Ireland to say that he wanted to put a hatchet through her head. You know, it was really wild. And I think she is a complex person, and she is actually quite difficult in some ways. She's inconsistent, she's grandiose, she's stately, she's extravagant. She's also a genius. She's like the funniest, most charismatic person any of us will probably ever meet. And I think that should be allowed. I think that's permissible.
I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. I'm so grateful to Sinead O'Shea for the conversation. And what a great time I had at TIFF. If you're curious about any of the films we've discussed on today's show, be sure to look for them in theaters or via streamers. And if you want to read any of my reviews from Film Festival Today or Hammer to Nail, you can find them on Instagram at Chris Reed Film. For the Cinemaniacs podcast, I'm Chris Reed. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll see you at the movies.